Hello, class. Today's lecture is going to be on one particular person, and that's Christopher Columbus. So I want to tell you a little bit about his life, his voyages to North America, and talk a little bit about his legacy here in North America and Europe. Now, I don't know if they still do this in grade school, but I can remember when I was young, probably in third or fourth grade, we had to read this poem. So I'm going to read this poem to you, which really romanticized Columbus, and we'll be talking about that also today. So the title of this poem is Columbus Sailed the Ocean Blue. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. He had 3 ships and left from Spain. He sailed through sunshine, wind, and rain. He sailed by night, he sailed by day. He used the stars to guide his way. 90 sailors were on board. Some men sailed, while others snored. Then the workers went to sleep, and others sailed the ocean deep. Day by day they looked for land. They dreamed of trees and rocks and sand. On October 12th, their dreams came true. You never saw a happier crew. Then in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So I can remember as a young man and all the way through my K through 12 education, being taught that Columbus discovered America. He was this very brave man who risked his life sailing into the middle of nowhere in the Atlantic Ocean. And I was led to believe that most people in the late 1400s still believed the earth was flat, so Columbus was taking this risky adventure where potentially he might sail off the edge of the world, where below that were serpents and dragons waiting to gobble him and his men and ships up. Now, obviously, that's all a bunch of baloney that was partially manufactured to glorify Christopher Columbus. And we'll talk about how when Columbus set sail in 1492, all educated people in Western Europe, and obviously he's leaving from Spain, and he was educated, as we'll find out when I tell you about his life, knew the earth was round. So nowhere in his mind did he think, oh my God, if I sail too far, I'll sail off the edge of the world. So let me tell you about his earlier life, then we'll talk about his first voyage to North America. Columbus was the son of a wool merchant and was born in Genoa, Italy, in, we believe, 1451. Now, Italy wasn't really Italy at the time. It was a group of different states that later united to become Italy in the 19th century. But regardless, he's born in Italy. When he was a teenager, he got a job on a merchant ship and started his career at sea and remained on that merchant ship until 1476 when pirates attacked the ship as it was sailing along the coast of Portugal. The ship sank, but Columbus floated to shore on a scrap of wood and eventually made his way to Lisbon, where he studied mathematics, astronomy, cartology, and navigation. So he's an educated man. Now, initially, he had come up with this idea to find a shortcut to Asia. And that's what he was doing when he sailed here to North America. He didn't know North America existed, neither did anybody else. And at the time of the late 1400s, trade had started to thrive with Asia, especially China. And there were really only two ways to get there. Portuguese sailors had figured out if you sail around the tip of Africa, you could then make your way by sea to China and Asia. Now, the other way to get there, and obviously that's a very long voyage. The other way to get there was a land route from Europe all the way to China, across Europe and Asia. And obviously that took a tremendous amount of time traveling on horseback or whatnot. So they were in search of a shortcut, and they knew the earth was round. So if you sail to the west, sooner or later you should end up in Asia. And that's what Columbus was trying to do. So he had come up with this plot of exploration. He first presented it to officials in Portugal, then to the English, but neither of them were interested in backing him because he needed money to do this. Finally, he presented his plan to the Spanish King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, and they decided to back Columbus's voyage. So they're the ones who's going to supply him with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, and the sailors. But Columbus also worked out a deal where he would get to keep 10% of whatever riches he found, and he would also receive, if successful, a title of nobility and be the governor of any of the lands he might encounter. So, he's going to set sail in August of 1492, but he's also going to have some pretty strict instructions from the king and queen. Because one thing that, we'll be talking about quite a bit in History 101, this is a part of basically a conquest for empire. And the 3 countries that were all in this big contest to see who could be the largest and greatest empire in the world in the 1415 and 1600s were Spain, who Columbus is going to explore for, England, and France. Now, France and Spain are Catholic countries. So back in this day and age, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, being devout Catholics, had to get permission from the Vatican in order to even go on this exploration. And the Pope told them that they had his blessings, but any people they may come in contact with, they were to try to convert them to the Catholic Church. So the king and queen instructed Columbus that was part of his duty also. So they left on August 3rd, and they will ultimately reach land in the Bahamas on October 12th, 1492. And most likely they landed on the Bahamian island of San Salvador, or it may have been another smaller island known as Guanahani. But regardless, they landed in the Bahamas. Now, I remember being taught, and I don't know if you were taught this, that Columbus discovered America. Columbus did not discover America. In fact, he wasn't even the first European in North America. Leif Erikson, the Viking, had sailed from Viking territory they had established in Greenland and arrived in North America, establishing permanent settlements in Labrador and Newfoundland around the year 1000. So he beat Columbus by a little bit, namely about 500 years. But for a long time, that was never recognized. And granted, it has been in the last 50 years that we discovered actual archaeological evidence of the Viking settlements in Labrador. So, he wasn't the first European, and he certainly wasn't the first North American. In other lectures you'll be watching that I present to you, there were Native American people here possibly up to 50,000 years ago. We don't know for sure. Some of the evidence left behind dates in the 40,000s, and, they may have come, we know for sure people came across the land bridge from Asia 13,000 years ago, but people arrived here long before that by boat and maybe on both oceans, the Pacific and the Atlantic, because I'll talk to you in another lecture about the Solutrean people from southern France and Spain, who in all likelihood, according to Dr. Stanford from the Smithsonian Institute, arrived here about 23,000 years ago. So there were a lot of Native Americans in the Bahamas waving to Columbus when they reached there. And all told, in North and South America in 1492, there were, as best as we can estimate, approximately 50 million people living in North America, Central America, the Caribbean, and South America. So it wasn't an uninhabited area that Columbus just waltzed upon and discovered. So, for a few months in 1492, Columbus will sail from island to island. He'll be looking around the Caribbean, looking for riches, because remember, he gets 10%, and he didn't find much. So in January of 1493, he will leave behind a makeshift settlement with one ship and make on the island of Hispaniola, which is present-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and he will return to Spain, leaving some of his men behind. Now, he kept a detailed diary of this first voyage that he wrote between August 3rd and November 6th of 1492, and I'm going to read you an excerpt from Columbus's actual diary. Now, we're lucky enough to have access to this diary because upon his return in 1493, he presented the journal that he had kept as a gift to Queen Isabella. And obviously, the Spanish government they've hung on to that forever, and it's part of their archives. So, let me get a drink of water here, and I'm going to read you this excerpt. According to Columbus, now this is a quote out of his journal, they brought us, meaning the native people that he came in contact with, parrots and balls of cotton and spears and many other things, which they exchanged for the glass beads and hawk's bells. They willingly traded everything they owned. They were well built with good bodies and handsome features. They do not bear arms, and they do not know of them. For I showed them a sword. They took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron. They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. So already he's thinking of enslaving these people. So, as I mentioned, Columbus gave that journal to Queen Isabella upon his return. Now, Columbus is going to make 3 more voyages to the Caribbean or North America. Besides his original voyage in 1492, he'll make a trip in 1493, 1498, and 1502, because he was determined to find the route to Asia. He thought he had landed in a group of islands that are off the continent of Asia, the East Indies. So he wanted to find the Asian continent. Now, that's why today, the islands in the Caribbean, the Bahamas and others, they're commonly known as the West Indies, because basically Columbus was lost and thought he was in the East Indies. That's why he also named the people that lived there Indians. So, in September of 1493, remember he returned in January of 1493. He decides to go back in September. He returns to the settlement that he had left on Hispaniola and found it destroyed. Native people had risen up and destroyed the settlement. So Columbus this time had brought his brothers with him, Bartholomew and Diego Columbus, and he left them there on Hispaniola to build a new civilization. And while they were there, they enslaved hundreds of indigenous people, and the people of Hispaniola were the Taino people, to build this civilization or capital that Columbus would be the governor of, according to his agreement. Then he headed west looking for gold and other valuable items. His group now included a large number of Taino people that he had brought with him and enslaved. And when Columbus returns to Spain later that year in 1493, he will bring with him 500 Taino people that he had enslaved. He will present them to Queen Isabella as a gift, and she was horrified by this. She believed that any people Columbus, quote unquote, discovered were Spanish subjects, because Columbus was also claiming all this territory for Spain. And Spanish subjects could not be enslaved. She promptly and sternly returned the slaves back to Columbus and told him to take them back. So he's not on the right footing with the Queen by this point. In May of 1498, Columbus returns to North America for the third time. In this visit, he will visit the Caribbean island of Trinidad, which is off the northern coast of South America, and he'll actually step foot in South America. Now, Columbus never stepped foot in North America. He did step foot in South America, and as we'll find out, he also stepped foot in Panama. Now, he'll go back to the ill-fated Hispaniola settlement, where there was another bloody revolt staged against, this time, his brothers because of their mismanagement and brutality towards the native Taino people. And he will appoint a new governor to take over to replace his ill-fated brothers and start forcing and enslaving more Taino people to search for gold and work on plantations they had established. Now, here's a little side note on what happened to the Taino people. When Columbus arrived in Hispaniola, there were about 250,000 inhabitants, the Tainos. By 60 years later, there were less than 200 people left. They either died of brutality at the hands of Columbus's lackeys, or disease, which we'll talk about later on, wreaked havoc on these people. Now, when Columbus returned back to Spain in 1498, he reported what had happened, and he was immediately arrested. He was charged with crimes against these people, because remember, the Queen considered them Spanish subjects. He went to court. He successfully defended himself, but he was stripped of all the noble titles he had been granted for his success in his first voyage, part of that first package deal he had made. So, Columbus now is a man of, he had regained some of his reputation, but had lost all his noble titles because of his actions. So he's allowed to go back for one more voyage in 1502. This time, he made his way all the way to Panama, where he abandoned two of his four ships that had been damaged in storms and also attacked by hostile Native American people. Already, the Native Americans don't like the sign of him and the Spanish. So, in 1502, he returned back to Spain, where he lived out the rest of his life, and he ultimately died of natural causes in 1506. So, that's the real story of Columbus. He wasn't this brave man who thought he might sail off the edge of the earth. He was, in fact, pretty brutal to the people he came in contact with. And, this is why there's been this movement to change the name of Columbus Day that we had been celebrating on October 12th to Indigenous Peoples Day. Now, let me talk just a couple minutes about that. I'm certainly all in favor of calling it Indigenous Peoples Day. Not everybody has adopted that yet. I think Clinton Community College still calls the days off we get on what was Columbus Day when I started working there 30 years ago to harvest break. I know a lot of colleges call it that. Why not celebrate a day for Indigenous people? Or we could kind of have a combination celebration. I don't know if any of you have ever been down to New York City on what was, or to many still is, Columbus Day in October. On that day, they have a huge parade in New York City. It's put on by the Italian American Association. And it's a celebration of Italian heritage. To many Italians, Columbus is the most famous Italian for his explorations. And they really celebrate Italian culture on that day. Now, I know a little bit about that because I'm about a quarter Italian. And my youngest daughter, when she was in college, applied for a scholarship from the Italian American Association. And she received that scholarship, and she and I went to a presentation dinner at their very impressive brownstone headquarters that's right off Central Park near Madison Avenue. And they informed us about all the great things that go on what they still call Columbus Day. And my daughter, Connie, is a lifetime honorary member of the association for being one of their scholars. And she also, anytime she wanted to come to that parade in October, she has a standing reservation in the special grandstands that the Italian Americans club members all sit in. So someday in the future, her and I are going to go down there and witness this firsthand and celebrate our Italian heritage. My great-grandfather, Peter Petrodi, came right to America on a ship through Ellis Island from Italy in the 19th century. So, that's the story of Christopher Columbus, and hopefully that sort of sets the record straight. And thanks for listening to me. I'll talk to you soon about other subjects in the exploration period. Everybody take care. Talk to you soon.